This is the Aunty and Brain Tumours talk show. It's a show full of informative chat and inspirational messages. The Aunty and Brain Tumours talk show on podcast.
Hi, my name is Maria. I was diagnosed with a meningioma in 2009 on New Year's Eve. In September 2009, I had my first symptoms. I felt that I had the machine that is measuring your blood pressure, and I felt that my left side was starting to get very tight. All the feeling was going up my left side and of my arm and then my body. And I remember telling my husband, just so that you know, I don't think it's a stroke, but I'm feeling this. The following day or 2 days, I went to see the doctor, my GP, and my GP said to me, well, those are migraines with aura. If something else happens, come back and see me. And lo and behold, a month later, I had again another episode, but this time I had a sensation in my hands that I couldn't grab whatever it was at the kitchen table. I cannot describe it to this day, but it was very difficult to feel a paper or an orange that I had in my hand. And then I contacted the doctor again and again said, don't worry, they are just migraines with aura. Go and lie down in a dark place. And that was it. That's what my doctor suggested. I talked to my family in Spain. I was fortunate enough to have family in Spain, and they said to me, Maria, I think you ought to have a look at and listen to a second opinion. It took some time convincing, and then eventually I went to Spain and I had a second opinion by the doctors in Spain. They did some tests, and I still remember to this day going in December to have an MRI and thinking, there is nothing wrong with me. But I had a split second there thinking, what if there is something wrong? Anyway, New Year's Eve, 2009, I went to see the neurologist who announced to me, Maria, you have a brain tumor. We need to operate it as soon as possible. My brain tumor at the time was the size of a golf ball, and that was my game for that night. It was New Year's Eve. I was celebrating with my family, and I thought, this is not going to let me have this is not going to put a damper on my feelings. Let's go with it. And there was jokes about my golf ball, and which, it was a bit dark humor, but that was my way to deal with it. In February 2010, I had my operation, and that brain tumor grew to the size of a tangerine. So that in itself made me consider that if I hadn't had that second opinion, that would have grown into something much larger, and I could have had some side effects that could have ended up in a much worse position. In January, I was put on Keppra at the time, and I remember very vividly thinking, I don't want to take any tablets. No, I don't want any tablets whatsoever. But at the same time, I started to understand the complications or the potential risk of not being under some kind of medication to control potential seizures. So I took Keppra at the time, and I was on Keppra for a couple of years after the operation. But seeing the neurosurgeon a month later, I remember a few days before the appointment, I was all over the place with emotions. I was scared, apprehensive. I had so many questions. I didn't even know where to start. And I remember having a conversation with my husband, Anthony, who said to me, why don't you write it all down? And then I decided that I was going to go to the appointment with 4 pieces of paper. I know it sounds quite ridiculous, but I knew I had a very small amount of time to talk to the surgeon. So I went with a paper that it was pre-op, during operation, post-operation, and the medication and recuperation. So the idea was that any single question, no matter how simple and small it was, I was going to ask, because I knew that the minute that I left the appointment, more questions were going to pop up and I wasn't going to have the answers. So he was very patient with me. I remember going one by one, and it was very, very patient. And he certainly put all my worries to one side. And then, of course, there was a big time between, a month. It's not a big time, but it felt like an eternity between that appointment and the operation. So I had to get ready to leave the UK, my home, with my family and move to Spain, pack everything for some time, which I had no idea how long it was going to be. And I remember thinking, what if I don't come back? What if something goes wrong? What if my surgeon sneezes? That was, I knew that it was a benign tumor, but complications can happen. And that fear is not going to go away until the event is over. So it was reassuring to think that, okay, I've got to go into action mode. That's how I operated. And one thing that I did is do a will. That certainly prompted me to do a will, because at the time I didn't know whether how was I going to be after the operation. The week before the operation was one of the most tense weeks, as you can imagine. It was a week where everything crosses your mind. You're trying to push away all your fears, but still, they are very rooted in your mind. And I celebrated with my family before the operation, a get together, and there I was on a Thursday morning, early on in the morning, and having my head shaved, or partially shaved, and giggling with the nurses, because that was my way of releasing my emotions, and with fear and emotions and shaking like a leaf. I remember that would never go away, but still smiling. That's how I had to face it. And there I was, in the operating theatre just moments before taking the anesthesia, and hoping that when I woke up, everything was going to be okay. But the first thing that my neurosurgeon did was came and gave me everything's going to right, everything is fine. I remember having like a huge, tight bandage around my head, and I was surprised. I tell you that it didn't hurt. My head did not hurt. I was super surprised, because I was thinking they've cut me open, which to me that was incredibly scary. But my head is not hurting. How is that possible? The neurosurgeon confirmed that they were able to remove it all, that everything was removed, nothing left behind. And in the next subsequent days, I had the results that it was a grade 1. I didn't need any treatments, and the only thing that I needed to have is the medication, the Keppra, for the next 2 years, and observe my development. And I think I was very fortunate that it was caught at the right time. That is my big takeaway. When I left the hospital, I felt like my feet were lead, and 20 steps I felt like a marathon in a way. It was so slow walking and tired. I never understood. However, I remember arriving home, and I think realization kicked in a little bit, that you look at yourself in the mirror, and it is those smiles that you have in front of others kind of go away in closed doors. You suddenly look at yourself and thinking, my gosh, this was serious, and I am lucky. So I was very fortunate to be able to have some leave, some compassionate leave or some medical leave, and that my husband was able to be with me for the recovery as well, and my young son, my 2.5-year-old son, who was with us. And one thing that I did, it does take a long time to go back to being yourself. You think that you've got it together, that you can do things, but everything is a lot slower. everything takes time, everything, and is that frustration that you have, or that you are not your old self. In the end, I guess I had to accept that I was a new version of me. But that takes time, and that comes with patience, which I didn't have certainly at the time. So for the next few weeks and subsequent to the operation, I learned to accept what I could and couldn't do, and how fast I could react. Coming back from Spain after the operation, I needed to keep going and keep going and keep going until eventually, when I came to the UK after X amount of time in Spain, I really flopped. And then I personally went for some counselling, private counselling. I contacted someone, and I remember floods of tears, floods of emotion, anger, sadness, happiness, everything in the same pot. And I couldn't understand, especially the anger, because I was never one to think, why did it happen to me? No, I just had the ticket, and I had a lucky ticket, because it was a meningioma. It wasn't one of the nasty tumors. But at the same time, it's kind of like, mm, I don't know, it's everything in the same mix, and had to make sense of it. And understanding my new me. Eventually, 3-4 years later, maybe, is when I got involved with the Brain Tumour Research. I was a volunteer there. I was in a different phase as well myself, where I was more ready to let the world know, because that's another phase that you have. And nobody tells you about the different phases of your brain tumor. One phase is you're in shock. One phase you are sadness. One phase you are fighting there, and you are wearing your warrior hat. But there is also the phase, that phase where you don't want to tell people because you don't want pity, and you don't want people to feel sorry for you, and you want to be your old self. I keep coming back to that point. But I think I reached that point that I was thinking, no, I think enough. I think I can tell others my story. My story is valid. That is another phase that I had, because my meningioma was benign. I felt a fraud. Why? Because I was a survivor, and I didn't have it as tough as others. Not that I would have wanted to have it, but those are the emotions that you pile on yourself. It's never, is that guilt that you carry, because also you survived, and maybe you felt, it's all those emotions that, should I be? Am I worthy of surviving that? It's those questions. But yes, when I was with Brain Tumour Research, it's a fantastic team and a fantastic place to be. If you are not involved and you have the opportunity to be involved, I encourage you. I met Sue Farrington Smith. She's a formidable woman, and she's done amazing and is continually doing amazing things for the organization. And then I got involved, and then I think the rest is history. I was fortunate as well to meet Liz Fassy and Susan Castle Smith, who were part of the PR side. And they said to me, Maria, how do you feel about telling your story and putting it online and having a photo with the boys? Because at that time, I had my second child. So when I had my brain tumor, I had a little 2.5-year-old boy. But by the time that I got involved, I had a 2-year-old boy, as well as my eldest son. And we all had a ball having photographs taken, but you knew what it was for. So it wasn't just for the fun of it, but it was to make others aware of brain tumors. So looking at the last 15 years, it was 15 years only last week when my operation took place. How do I feel in reflection of that? I feel that the tumor doesn't define me, who I am. And that was one of my worries. The tumor has made me who I am today, a stronger person, a stronger version of myself. The tumor has made me understand how vulnerable you can feel 1 minute, and then time will heal yourself, or certainly time will give you the necessary tools to be whoever you are in the future. I think for me, there were a few years where I totally lost the sense of who I was. I remember I didn't fit in on anything, from being Maria, an HR manager working in London, a high career, and performing well in the organization, to suddenly stopping everything because I stopped. I took voluntary redundancy because I evaluated my life. My son was 2.5 years old, and who did I want to become? But again, I lost my identity from being Maria, that person, to Maria, the wife and mum. Of course, you are more than just that. But at the time, I was lost, and I guess, whilst I didn't want to accept it, and I didn't want any help or anything like that. 15 years later, looking back, I would say, don't underestimate what you go through, but at the same time, hang in there. Hang in there. There is light. Every day you're becoming stronger, even if you don't think so. So I think I wish someone would have held my hand and say, you've got this. You've got this.
This is the Aunty and Brain Tumours talk show. It's a show full of informative chat and inspirational messages. The Aunty and Brain Tumours talk show on podcast.